Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Taylor, and in today's video we're going to do even more work to the 70 El Camino to get it one step closer to that first fire up. And today we're going to start with addressing the transmission. As you saw in last video, I just had lowered the engine down in there, but I hadn't yet bolted up the bell housing to the back of the engine. So I'm going to be doing that right now, and I'll show you how all that looks right here. Now, despite my efforts of protecting my brand new pan, you can see it got a little scraped up here, so it's no big deal, but I threw this towel in, so it's probably about as easy of a job as it could be on this side here. So I'm just gonna paper all this off and repaint this area, scuff it up a little bit, no big deal. Then you can see there, I've got just a little bit of a gap at the bottom of the bell housing. The top is actually touching, and you can see that dowel from the back of the engine block is actually resting inside of there. So we are sitting very close to where this thing should be mounted 100%. Now back here you can see that I had to loosen these up again just to kind of free up any load that was on this thing. So I think, now hopefully I'm right, but I think if I throw the bolts through here and just tighten them up, it's gonna bring the tilt of the engine up just a little bit, and then I can go ahead and snug the rest of the bolts up. But I do want to be careful because this is just some cast material and I don't want to put too much stress on it and crack it. So hopefully this all goes to plan right now. I can get this thing bolted in here. One last thing that I did notice in regard to clearance is the shift mechanism. Right now I believe it's in first gear and park is all the way back here. So I may what I'll do instead of banging on the car any more than I already have, I'll take this off and just grind that edge off the top because this little nipple does actually clear. But there's a squared off part up here that I will have to grind down, but we'll get to that later in the video. So right now, I guess I'm gonna pull this strap off of here, tighten up the bell housing, and just see how everything fits before we take our measurements for the driveline. Well guys, this thing is really coming a long way quick now. I finally got the bell housing bolted up, and I painted the pan again. I'll show you that real quick, but it's looking really nice under here. And I have to say, this is probably one of the nicer big block Chevy oil pans I've ever seen. You can see I just touched this up on the side. It's not perfect, but for underneath the car, it looks good. But hopefully you can see up there on camera, there's a lot of clearance between the bottom of the pan up front and the cross member. And on my old Summit racing pan, it was literally hitting. And then up here, that steering cross member would actually hit my pan as well. And this has a good kick out on either side, or a dimple rather on either side for clearance on that steering bracket there. So looking really nice under here. The bolts are all in for the bell housing. Seems to be that we have good clearance on the top of the transmission and out back. I will definitely have to make an adjustment to this. But I've got our cross member all bolted up and tight back here. So one other thing I want to do, I'm going to go grab some grade 8 hardware like this for the two sides here. I'll have to do that tomorrow. It's Sunday night. Everybody's closed. But once we're done kind of mocking everything up, I will go ahead and shoot this again just to clean that cross member up. And, pretty decent clearance out here by the yoke. So I think we're ready to take our driveline measurement now. Guys, underneath the car, I just measured up for the driveline, and I am going to be building a driveline with a slip joint in it. It's going to be similar to like a front driveline and a four-wheel drive. This transmission originally came with this bolt yoke here you see, and then it would have had like a carrier bearing further down with a slip joint in it. But since we're putting this in a car, it ideally would have had to have either a slip yoke in the drive shaft or that joint. And since this 4L80E, they come with a pretty short yoke, I decided to be best to build that joint into the driveline. So I just measured 56¼ inches from mounting surface to mounting surface there. So tomorrow I'm gonna have to go in and measure, or not measure, but give the driveline guy my measurements along with my current driveline. And he said he's about 2 weeks out, so hopefully we can get it back sooner from him just for the sake of getting this thing rolling. But we should be able to fire this thing up tomorrow. Under here, you can see everything's buttoned up. It's so nice to see something that just looks beautiful under here. Of course, it'll never look this nice again, but see all the freeze plugs and everything, just looking great. So the next step really is going to be to wire up the starter. Once I wire the starter up, I'm going to go ahead and put the passenger side header in here with the gasket, bolt all that stuff up. The collector should land somewhere kind of in here, and then we'll head to the other side. I do have to take that steering rod out up there. I had that out the other day to paint it, and I had to reinstall it so I could steer this car around. But you can see I've got a little bit of wiring here to do for my oil pressure gauge And then once we get those headers in, I can put the plugs in and make sure I get all those gapped up, and then we'll be ready to drop this thing back down on the ground. All right guys, well it's actually a few days ahead in the future, and I have the engine completely finished, and just wanted to do all the tedious stuff off camera so it wasn't too boring, but got the radiator in, the fan, the shroud, I've got coolant in it, I've left the cap off so we can bleed it out, all the heater hoses are hooked up, fuel lines, it's at top dead center, had to throw the distributor in, so pretty much ready to try this thing right now. I'm gonna go ahead and prime it off a little bit without the fuel pump or the power going to the coil, turn it over just to get the oil pulled up from the filter, and then we'll plug all that stuff back in and see if we can make some noise. Guys, one other thing that was pretty interesting, if you see that spot there where it's just kind of bare aluminum and then it gets shinier down below, that is actually a raised area on the valve cover mounting surface with those cylinder heads, and I didn't even know that it had that, I just wasn't paying attention. So I needed these valve cover spacers when I had iron heads on the car with the roller rockers and these shallow valve covers. But now that I have those aluminum heads with that raised surface, I actually don't need these, which is great. And I have plenty of clearance now between the booster and the AC box over there. And had I known that, I probably would have not punched a hole in that AC box when I was putting the engine in, but it is what it is, right? So fits excellent in here. All right, guys, fingers crossed. I got my buddy Trevor here to oversee everything. Oh my God, guys, that fired up quick. I think I need to advance the timing a little bit. Oh my God. Ooh.
That shook the whole house.
It like scared me. I was like, oh my God. There we go. I'll bring a timing light out later, but I think that's good enough. I can give this thing a little more idle screw as well. That made some noise. We had good oil pressure too, like right off the get-go. Oh. Well guys, that does it. The thing finally runs, and honestly I cannot believe it started up that quick. I primed off that fuel system a little bit just till I saw fuel coming out of the squirters in here, and I mean just like one crank, I mean you were right there and it just lit right away, and then I had to give it a lot more idle screw and it just took off. But I don't know if the camera's gonna do that sound any justice because it's just so overwhelming. It's just like you can feel it in your chest, it's so loud. But yeah, really incredible stuff. I'm super excited to get this thing on the road, and I'm gonna bring you guys along for that, of course. But here's the engine back in, running, ready to go. So we just gotta move on to finishing up the wiring and the plumbing for the cooling system on the transmission. We'll go through that whole standalone easy TCU system for that 4L80E, and then we'll throw that drive shaft in there, and we'll be going for a ride in the next video. As always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up for me and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more automotive content like you saw here today. There's lots more content coming, so stay tuned. I look forward to seeing you guys next video.